in many overt ways, he's still like one of my hugest influences. Like I'll sometimes very actively look back at his work or my lessons with him to, relearn or rethink of something, or, try and do my version of that. And that's something that will happen on and off throughout my career. But it goes deeper than that with him because, I obviously lived with him my whole childhood, early adulthood, and he was my teacher right from the beginning. So his sort of style of music making, the way he taught me, like all of that is very embedded in my own music making, because my music making was formed by learning with him. So in that sense, it's harder to answer the question, because even when I'm doing something that maybe on paper doesn't necessarily look like it's got his stamp on it, it must still be in there somewhere, because that's the ground from which I start with everything. So I think it's across the board.
Was it just a given growing up that you would be a musician?
It wasn't a given, but it was like the most obvious, maybe,
Yes.
Everyone was very clear that like if I wanted to do something else, that would be okay. But it was also very clear to me that this is the thing they would love me to do. And similarly from my side as well, like I had other interests, I had other curiosities, but this was unfolding from my childhood. I was playing, I was immersing, I was performing from teenagehood. So even while I had other curiosities, this was already becoming the thing that I was putting the most into. And so I was becoming the most good at. So that became the most viable career option as well.
Absolutely. So ahead of your concert, ahead of your tour, I should say, you have released the first of a trilogy of what you describe as mini albums. Could you describe the concept behind these mini albums?
Yeah, I just, I've been making music for a while now, and I'm very used to the conventional album structure of making something that's approximately an hour in length. And I always think very thematically about those albums. I tend to have an overarching theme or a story or something that threads it together. They're never just random songs. And I was struggling in the last sort of, during the pandemic and post-pandemic period to know what I wanted to make for a next album. And I just felt a bit stuck for a while, which is funny because from the outside, I still looked creative. I released a live album. I was releasing songs here and there. But as far as an album, I was feeling stuck. I didn't know what I wanted to make. And for me, turning it into something that felt more like immediate snapshots that I was sharing with people quicker and could kind of free me to just be creative. Somehow it just freed me to make the idea more simple. And in an ironic way, it's become more complex because actually it's 3 mini releases instead of one. But that's in a logistical sense. Musically, what that did for me was just bring me back to what creativity is about, which is just not overanalyzing, not overthinking, just getting in a room with artists and making music. And I really liked the idea of working with different collaborators on every smaller chunk. Like instead of having one producer and an overall sound for an hour's worth of music, what if there was maybe some overarching theme that may come clear later, but I was only working with one producer for 4 or 5 songs, and then having a completely different sound come out of me for the next third because I'm working with someone else. So I just found myself very curious about what it would be to release music as an evolving story. Like by the time I finish chapter 1 and we're already releasing it, I have no idea what chapter 3 is,
Yes.
So there's like a weird danger to that because you're putting it out there and then it has to make sense later, but also it feels very, very present. It's very much more immediate than it usually is, which is nice.
A Carnatic lullaby. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, daydreaming is drawn from a Carnatic lullaby. There's a song Madhava Mamava that my grandmother used to sing to me when I was young. It's very beloved in the south of India. And it kind of came back to me when I was with my kids one afternoon. And it's a song I may have known in my childhood, but I've never played it on the sitar. And like so often happens, we talk so often about East-West collaborations, but actually North-South collaborations are so fascinating as well. So to hear the melodies that I knew in a Southern Indian inflection, but then to try that on my sitar felt very intriguing. Like it was a different way of bending notes. It was a different, and then I also liked the idea of placing that as a real lullaby, slowing it down, rearranging it with a piano, making it very much a new feeling to that song. All the other songs on chapter one are more fully original. They're not drawn from anything else. But they all kind of exist in what I feel like would fit on that kind of a lazy summer's afternoon. On the whole, it's quite relaxing. It does have some peaks and troughs within that, but on the whole, it's very much a dreamy kind of.
Yeah, I did get that sense of very dreaminess and a wistfulness to it that came out.
Nostalgia, there's some longing, there's some tenderness. Like it's a lot of delicacy, I think. The last release I did before this was a song called In Her Name, which is very that's another story altogether. But on a technical side, on a playing side, it's very hard. It's very fast. It's very loud, and I love that side of musicianship as well. I love going into that. But I just really felt like I was in a phase of wanting to allow my vulnerability, allow tenderness, like to really be in that place as a musician. And so it was very, beautiful getting to make this music. Mm-hmm. And the title, chapter one is obvious because it's the beginning of the trilogy, and Forever for Now just kind of tickled me and felt interesting because it was this idea that like, even when we say forever, we actually don't know. Like it could just be for now, whatever that's about. Right. And whatever we think of as forever is only for a certain amount of now. It's hardly ever actually forever. So there was this sense of like really being present and really appreciating the preciousness of everything, because we can't actually take forever for granted,
Right. And I think to the point that I was making earlier, post-pandemic, I think we've all struggled with sort of the tenuousness of life.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. And
that was very much coming. So the musical themes and the feelings in that sense were very much coming out of the experience of the pandemic. Like I still feel like that has lingered for me emotionally, the idea
Absolutely.
of how quickly everything can fall apart,
Absolutely. So have you already written chapter 2 or and when do you expect?
So as we've been preparing the release of chapter 1, I've been writing chapter 2, and it's now recorded and I'm mixing, and I'll title everything soon and come up with a title, and in a couple of months I'll start writing chapter 3. So it's a really funny hopscotch, like there's kind of simultaneous layers of record making happening at the same time, which is it's quite fun actually.
Absolutely. Did you record it in the same studio in Germany?
No. So with each chapter, I've been in a different studio, different collaborators, and a very different sound, even though I'm making sure that the last song of one chapter leads nicely into the first song of the next chapter. So you can listen to it all in sequence. They do each have a distinct feel.
Mm-hmm. For the first album, you collaborated with Pakistani singer Arooj Aftab. Could you talk a little bit about what constantly draws you back to collaborations with her?
Well, constantly, we've just collaborated a couple of times in the last 2 years or so. So one, that's been a natural process of extending something that seemed to work. Like we worked together for the first time on one song. We'd known each other. First of all, there's a compatibility that comes from being friends. That's the first thing to say, I suppose, because we've actually known each other for many years. But we only worked together on her song Udherona, I think, again, over the winter of, losing track of years now, 21 to 22. Mm-hmm. Or 20 to 21. Yeah, 20 to 21. It was 2020 to 21. That winter is when I recorded it. But we recorded it remotely. We were never in the same room. But we finally got to play it live together in London that spring when she came here to perform. And that was really fun. And it reminded me how easy it is to be with her. We get along, but also our musical collaboration had worked. Mm-hmm. I felt like she really listened to and understood my work, and I really loved what she's making and what she's doing. So asking her to produce was kind of like asking, you know, just saying, I trust you, I trust your sound. I'm really curious to see what would happen if you guide me as a producer, you know? And yeah, so that basically that single song probably led to me asking her to produce.
Fantastic. And who are some of the other musicians that we can expect to see on subsequent albums?
Well, I'll tell you as it all goes on, but
A hint.
but in chapter 1, as you know, I mean, it's a very small group of musicians. There's only 4 musicians total on the album, outside of Arouj producing. She doesn't play actually, but Niels Fram, the great Niels Fram, who's like Arouj, one of my favorite musicians in the world. He features on 3 of the 4 songs, which is like a huge honor. I found him incredibly generous to just play alongside me on these songs and add his very particular sound world. It's very unique, it's very special, and is a huge part of, you know, the sound of daydreaming. And then alongside that, we have a wonderful bassist, Gal Maestro, a woman from she lives in Spain, and Magda Yannakou, who's a Greek accordion player. So it's a lot of women on the record, which is great. And chapter 2 I made in LA with a friend who I've known for many years, and he produced, and almost the whole chapter is either solo sitar or a little bit of piano accompaniment, but sitar in a way that you've kind of never heard before, like really the sound, like really playing with the sound of the instrument in a technical way and looking into that. And then chapter 3 will open up and be more dynamic with a few more instrumentalists and a bit more upbeat. So it's kind of, yeah, it's evolving as we go.
Fantastic. And when are you releasing chapter 2 and chapter 3?
In time for tours in various areas. So I'm kind of feeling like I can offer music as I come to different people, basically. So we're releasing chapter 1 in time to come back to North America. I'll release chapter 2 for Europe, and then hopefully chapter 3 for India. So it's kind of like each of my home countries are really playing a big influence in the music I'm writing. So I'm kind of trying to have a release for when I go to those places.
Fantastic. And I'd like to conclude with your North American tour. What do you hope to bring to your audiences here?
I mean, I always hope to bring the best show I can. I always try to bring something different. I don't, you know, come back with the same band again and again or the same sound. It's always changed. So this year, I'm touring with an incredibly versatile and dynamic group of musicians who can kind of travel as well as I do between genres and styles and rhythms and dynamics. So we can really just follow each other at a moment's notice and play shifting music, which is really exciting. And yeah, they're all just gorgeous musicians, and it's a mix of some of the new music from chapter 1. It's also a lot of improvised stuff or reinterpreted versions of old things. So yeah, a little bit of everything.